building and spending. Is Qatar ready?
Well, Qatar is certainly ready to see some football, whether or not you agree with that message, whether or not FIFA have made it clear that they want the tournament to go on, to FIFA take centre stage. It is true that Qatar has pulled all the strings to make this tournament possible. Some of the stadiums are absolutely marvellous, you have to admit, including this one, the Al-Bayt stadium, which literally translated means the house. And Qatar are going to hope to make this their house, at least the space of this evening when they take on Ecuador in less than an hour. But it is true that other parts of the country not quite ready. Certain fan zones, certain fan accommodations perhaps not meeting standards. We'll have an opportunity to speak about that later, but certainly it is time, after all the debates, all the controversy, for football to finally take centre stage and for the World Cup to be remembered for what it is, which is a sporting tournament.
We just caught a few of those fireworks going off just behind you. We'll also in Doha for us is Selina Sykes. Selina, you've been tasked with following the Bleus' every move over the next few weeks. France are, of course, looking to defend their title, but they're having to cope, of course, with injury after injury. What, then, can you tell us, is the mood like in the squads?
That's right, James. I think the debate here is really, will the champions' curse apply once again to this French side? It was Les Bleus who started the so-called champions' curse, what fans say, all the way back in 2002. They came into the tournament as the reigning champions, after having won in 1998. And since then, a string of European teams have won the World Cup and then seen themselves knocked out at the first stages, at the first hurdle. So I think it's safe to say that the mood's been a bit of a subdued one. Why is that? Because Karim Benzema has pulled out. The bad news broke last night. We saw him train here with the rest of the French team at the training ground for the French side. He took part in the first training session. He'd been previously training solo, separately from the rest of the French team. He then pulled out of that with a pain in his left thigh, having then been sent straight to a local hospital here to have a scan on his thigh. And then the bad news came there and then that he would have to pull out of the competition, that he had suffered a tear to his left thigh. Didier Deschamps saying that he's gutted for the Ballon d'Or winner. It's a big blow for everyone involved here in the French camp for him not to be featuring. Didier Deschamps saying that he will not replace him. He will not be calling up another player to get on that plane to Doha. He has the option until tomorrow evening, 24 hours ahead of France facing Australia in Group D in their opener, though it's probably something that he had already foreseen. We were at Clairefontaine earlier this week when he called up Marcus Thuram, so it's something that he probably had foreseen already, and so he's not decided to call up an extra player to replace Karim Benzema.
Selina, one of the questions we've all been asking ourselves with all of this going around the, of course, controversy and everything surrounding the World Cup is, will the fans turn up? So what have you seen since you've arrived? Have fans turned out, and have any of those that you've spoken to, are they confident that France can perhaps put on a good performance amid all of this?
Well, if we're talking about French fans, we've just spotted a few this morning when we were on the Corniche. It's on the waterfront in the city centre, where most of the fans will be congregating. Obviously, maybe a bit early for French fans to be congregating yet, obviously with the first match for Les Bleus taking place on Tuesday evening. With others, we've seen a lot of South American fans, a lot of Argentinian fans maybe gearing up for the fact this may well be Messi's last World Cup. It has to be pointed out that it's very hot here during the day. So when we were out during the day here, it's not so many fans. But as we were making our way to the French ground this evening, as the sun set and the temperatures dropped, we could see that slowly fans were trickling out. So I think heat will play a major factor in this tournament. And obviously we will see more and more fans trickle their way through as their teams feature in these group stages.
All right, well, let's talk a bit more about France's chances. And for this, I'm glad to be able to welcome Louis Saha, former France footballer, who many will also remember from his days in the Premier League. Louis, first, France are being delivered blow after blow, as Selina said just there. When you're in this kind of a situation of uncertainty, how does this affect the squads? And with the players, of course, they're preparing for one of the most important campaigns of their lives. How does this affect them?
Yes, I think it does affect them because those players that get injured are pivotal ones. If you want to remain champion, you have this kind of balance between the experience and then the youth. Someone who's not been called up could be a surprise, and then maybe opposition can struggle to defend against them. But when you have like one, it's okay. But two, three, where you really like maybe base your whole kind of like tactics around those players, it's quite a demanding task for players, especially in midfield. You definitely have to have that kind of confidence, but understanding about your position, whatever the tactic the manager have decided, you have to apply them pretty much like every minute on every game. Otherwise, it's going to cost a lot. So all this in the camp where people discuss, people think about who's going to start, who's going to have to have an impact is a kind of a difficult one when you don't have enough experience inside the camp.
Yeah, let's just jump back very quickly to Selena there, because Selena, you just attended Didier Deschamps' latest press conference. What is the latest with regard to the squad there?
So I'll just correct you there, James. We didn't hear from Didier Deschamps. We heard from Ibrahim Konate, who did press on that. And he's saying that really because of all these injuries that we've seen, obviously Paul Pogba and N'Golo Kanté being long ruled out of this. And then we've had Presnel Kimpembe and Christopher Nkunku ruled out as well. He's said that it's the younger generation that are having to step up, him included. Let's start firstly in midfield. Obviously, two big losses with no Pogba, no Kanté. So several young players are having to step up, including Aurélien Tchouameni. We have Eduardo Camavinga. Lots of players that can take hold, and maybe they have to step up now. We've got young players in midfield, and that will be a concern for the French side. But there's some good news in defence. Let's just be clear. Raphaël Varane does look set to be fit for France-Australia. So there is some good news in the French camp. But Konate made it very clear that this is really the time for a new generation of players to step up and show what they're made of.
So, of course, yeah, all these players just getting ready for all of that. Louis, just wondering, what does it feel like as a player? Because, of course, you're in a certain kind of a bubble at this point. You're preparing for that opening game. It's just one day away. What's going on in players' minds at this point?
To be totally honest, it's a very old one because none of the experience that I had was without being in the camp for at least a month before a competition starts. There is like, okay, you've been here for 10 days and you still kind of like have to figure out what's going to be the tactic, who's going to start. So it's a bit eccentric, I guess. Those players, as like has been said just previously, that they need to step up, and this is not easy when you don't have maybe, as I said before, the kind of like, the training, the kind of like opportunity before, like with like a full friendlies, at least to actually set up that thing. It's the unique situation, and that's why I think there will be a lot of upset surprises. Maybe not only in French camp, but I don't expect that maybe the first few games will be a difficult one. But the setup of these players, like starting the competition at this stage, with that pressure around this competition, is quite a demanding thing. So I will be in the bubble, but not as comfortable as like 1 month allowed me to be, with understanding of pretty much like what's going to be around me. It's a very big ask, I think, really big.
And you mentioned just a bit before about the midfield, France's midfield, which is this whole issue, of course, with Pogba and Kanté not being there. You as a striker, of course, would depend a lot on those balls coming from their way. How does that make you feel to feel that perhaps, that midfield isn't exactly what Deschamps wanted to put out there? The younger ones clearly are having to step in for some of the more experienced ones, some crucial members of that French squad until now.
Yeah, it's going to be crucial. Really, like we all know how important midfielders are. As I said, the position, the confidence, the aggression, the kind of tempo you have to impose to the opposition is coming from the midfield. Wherever like you feel like they are technical enough or have legs and energy, you can pump it out and being drained after 25 minutes when you don't feel like you get experience enough to remain calm. In a situation, especially in the World Cup. So all this experience where you have like players around you can help you to do that. It's very important. So I do think that all those players, they are in the big stage with their clubs. Some are playing with Real Madrid. They will definitely have that kind of experience. But being in that environment, it's going to be something that pretty much like in a very short amount of time, the manager and the experienced players have to give them the full picture. Having that calmness is going to be vital for them. Really, it's going to be important.
And amid all of this, do you think that France still stand a chance of defending that title? How far do you think that the Bleu can actually go?
Yeah, it is possible because they still have the greatest players at the moment. Kylian Mbappe, Griezmann will shine and step up as well. He's not maybe young, but he will be asked to really like filling the gap with Benzema being in a squad. So that's going to be an opportunity for him as well to actually show how good player he is. I'm sure that he's got his teeth really like scratching the ground. So it's a great platform for all those players to actually show how talented they are. So I think they still have respect from every team in the world. This World Cup is always an opportunity to discover players. So I do think that the French squad have an immense talent down there. So it's possible, definitely possible.
So very confident in the Bleu there. I have to ask you, because of course many players we've heard giving their views with regards to all the situations in Qatar. Is it fair to ask those who are on the field, those who are playing, and of course who are focusing on their job exactly? Is it fair to ask these people, these players, to take a position on matters such as human rights and all the other topics that have come together in this ahead of Qatar's kickoff?
No, what is not fair, to be honest, is to ask the question to the wrong people. Not every player have to respond. Some who are capable because they have enough experience can step up as captain or whatever. As like, he's got a really like strong mind and he knows what to expect from that. You can't ask every player to actually step up because this is big. There is society things or politics involved. That's not their job. So basically, I think if you are capable of having an opinion and stand for it, fine. You have to use your influence if you want it, but you don't have to be forced to do it. And this is where I think some of the people, some of the politicians have like asked too much. I think it's important to stop them to do that because those kids are 25. They're not 44 like me, old and retired, who don't represent anything more. I don't like sponsor as much as like those guys have. So it's unfair for this. But what is unfair is to actually for those guys to speak. But if they want to, yes, please, I invite them to do it in the right manner.
So who do you think should these questions be directed towards instead?
Oh, definitely. The FIFA, they may now ask to be like only focused on football. That's super easy. But maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you could have done some better work in terms of marketing or in terms of effort or forcing whatever like question to be answered correctly. Now, putting at like maybe 1 month, you hear all those things. And even Sepp Blatter has like said that it was a mistake. You know, it's like those are like horrific because he opened the discussion in the worst moment where you could have maybe done so many things maybe before or it was maybe too late. I don't know. But all those questions is like now politicians on the back of it, you know, they just jump on this trend and it's super easy like this. I look good. But yes, when we asked you maybe 10 years ago, no one was there and no one was able to boycott anybody because there is maybe some other situation was more important for them. So now, because it's a big stage, like 3 billion people will be in front of the TV. Now they want to look more into integrity and more with the morals and all that. That's too easy, and that's definitely not the place to actually do that.
Well, Louis Saha, thank you very much for giving your side and your views on these very important matters here on the show. We'll, of course, be speaking to you later throughout the competition. Thank you very much for coming on the show for now. Well, the controversy continues as we head towards kick-off. Alcohol sales are now banned, as we've learnt just recently, inside stadiums. Supporters have also reportedly been flown in to fill the seats of stadiums which were built by migrant workers. And reports claim that Qatar has unreported the number of deaths on those building sites.
Migrant workers throng the streets of Doha celebrating the approaching World Cup. Some of these workers have laboured on the building sites of Qatar for more than 10 years. The lot of migrant workers has been a matter of controversy which has shrouded the hosting of the World Cup by the oil-rich emirate. Qatar's petrodollars have drawn manpower from Asia and Africa. Immigrants make up more than 80% of the country's population. These workers who have built the stadiums, the metro and other infrastructure are housed in remote, insalubrious dormitory towns. France 24 met a number of them who said they've not been paid in months.
Every day they promise us to give up the salary and not yet giving the salary.
The company has taken all our passports. What should we do here? This is slavery, this is kind of prison. This is you abusing human rights.
Long working hours in sweltering heat, often with no limits on time and for derisory salaries, conditions denounced by NGOs and which pushed Qatar to implement some reforms from 2018. But 3 years later, The Guardian revealed that 6,500 foreign workers have died in Qatar in the decade since the World Cup was awarded, figures that Doha has strongly contested.
Ever since we were awarded the World Cup, Qatar has faced an unprecedented campaign of criticism like no other country. Many are wondering about the real motivations behind these attacks.
NGOs and some national football associations have called for a fund to be established to compensate the families of workers who have died, but Qatar remains firmly opposed.
Well, the images that you saw there in the workers' room were part of a longer report by Chloe Dama, which you can find on our website and on YouTube. Chloe joins us now. Chloe, hi to you. Before we just go any further, let's just remind ourselves of some of the comments from FIFA boss Gianni Infantino just yesterday.
Today I feel Qatari. Today I feel Arab. Today I feel African. Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled. Today I feel a migrant worker.
Chloe, in light of those comments, how do you think that those workers, the migrant workers that you met, how do you think they'll be feeling about that?
I mean, it's a difficult question. I'm not sure how they would react to this specific declaration, but what I can tell you is that when I was in Doha and I was speaking to some of the migrant workers about the upcoming FIFA World Cup, the feeling I got was that for them, this celebration was something a bit distant. I mean, the daily life of a migrant worker in Qatar, first of all, they live far away from the cities, from the stadiums, from the fan zones. They live in collective accommodations outside these cities. They wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning. They go straight to work. They work all day. And when they're done, they are brought back to these collective accommodations where they're very tired. They go to sleep. And then it continues every day. It is the same. They have very little time to enjoy a football game, look at international news, or just enjoy any type of leisure. So they're seeing this from a distance. Now, when you ask them again more specifically, you know, what they're expecting from the World Cup, how they feel when they see the stadiums and all the infrastructure, a lot of them don't really see the glamour and this global football event. For them, it's also a reminder of the suffering of migrant workers that have labored for months and sometimes years under the sun to build the stadiums, but also all of the infrastructure in Doha, the roads, the airports, the metro. And so, yeah, for them, it's also a reminder of all this suffering.
you still in touch with any of them? Have their situations changed since then?
I am still in touch, yes, with the people that we have filmed. Their situation hasn't really changed. So Ibrahim, who is the Kenyan worker we just saw, he was exploited by a Qatari company. He had already left that company when we finished the report. He says that he was able to retrieve his passport, but that he never got his paychecks. He also says that he can't go back to Kenya because he had to borrow some money in order to travel to Doha, and that his salaries, most of them which were not paid, are not enough for him to repay that debt. So he's kind of stuck now in Doha. He's surviving on little jobs here and there. We also filmed a group of Filipino women who work in a beauty salon. They are still in Doha. They are still working very long hours to send money back to their families back home. And I think something that is also important to look at is that for a lot of migrant workers, Qatar is also a land of opportunity. They come to Doha looking for a better life, and in some cases, they do find a better life. So, yeah, I think it's important to highlight that for migrant workers, Qatar is not only a nightmare. For some of them, it's also a sort of El Dorado.
Opening ceremony, of course, it's just taken place in that stadium where we saw Simon just at the top of the show. It's a stadium where, and I quote here from The Guardian, 28-year-old Nepalese migrant Sanjib Raya died of heart failure working a 12-hour shift in 40 degrees for £1 an hour. Infantino spoke of hypocrisy from the media, but to defend Qatar to the extent that with what everything has happened, surely there's some hypocrisy in this as well.
I mean, what we've seen in the recent weeks, you know, the debates about whether to boycott or not the World Cup, it's raising a lot of issues, and I think these issues are not new. I mean, since day one, we knew that Qatar was not a democracy. We knew that it's a small country that doesn't have enough local labor to be able to build all the infrastructure that was needed. So we knew that it was going to have to import that workforce. We also knew that these migrant workers would be working under labor laws, a set of labor laws that are known as the kafala system, which is now being reformed, but at the time it wasn't. And that system allows for human rights abuses. I mean, we also knew that Qatar is a very hot country and that it would raise environmental issues. So I think there is an element of hypocrisy in the timing of the outrage. Now is way too late to pinpoint these issues that should have been addressed about a decade ago. So I'm not saying we shouldn't highlight them or point fingers at Qatar. I'm saying that from the moment that the rest of the world said, OK, Qatar can organize this football tournament, well, then the outcome also becomes a collective responsibility.
Just to clarify to our viewers, we did try to get a FIFA representative on the programme to be able to perhaps answer back to some of the accusations that have come their way, but we did not get any positive response from them, so it's good to hear the view that you're giving to us there of both sides of the situation. In the full version of the report that you put out, you visited the courts that were set up for workers, the labour courts. They seemed quite empty at the time. Is there any news on whether they've opened yet? Is there going to be any change actually for these migrant workers who are so important for Qatar, not just for the World Cup, but for the country in general, as you just said there?
So there have been improvements in Qatar, notably an important labor law reform that introduces things like labor courts, but also minimum wage, compulsory time off. It also prohibits working outside under the sun when it's too hot. And this is actually one of the most progressive set of labor law reforms in the Arab world. So it's all there on paper, but the challenge is implementation. On the ground, human rights abuses continue to happen every day. A lot of the employers, a lot of the companies in Doha do not respect the new laws, and so far the Qatari authorities do not have the means to establish strict controls. One of their main issues is their human capital. Qataris are a minority in their own country. Migrant workers form between 80 and 90% of the population. So there is a lack of civil servants that will be able to go on the ground and really pinpoint all of the abuses. And so moving forward, after the World Cup, Qatar can either choose to pursue the reforms and work on the implementation or not. And the risk is that once the football fans are gone and once the spotlight turns away from Qatar, well, migrant workers might sort of fall back into oblivion and then go back to being shadow workers nobody really cares about.
Right, well, I'm sure you'll be following that very closely. Chloe Douma, thank you very much for your insights in Beirut there. Well, let's go to Simon now. Simon, you spoke to Welsh player Jess Fishlock, who's also an LGBTQ ambassador. Here's what she had to say to you just a little earlier.
Would I like to see Hugo Lloris wear an armband? Of course I would. But if he himself doesn't feel like that's what he wants to do for the reasons that he wants to give, he's entitled to have that opinion and that thought process. People will not agree with it. Some people might, you know. I think that's why this World Cup is probably so unique, is that we are going to have those moments where somebody does something, somebody doesn't, and everybody has an opinion on what's right and what's wrong. It's a very difficult, delicate, political situation that we're in right now.
Simon, it's a tricky situation then, of course, when we hear everything that is coming from the player side. And as Louis Saha was saying just a little earlier, that everyone, of course, is entitled to taking a position or not. We heard there Hugo Lloris, so the French goalkeeper, deciding not to wear a armband for gay rights. Some have, though.
Some have, absolutely. We know that Harry Kane is going to do it. The German FA is going to do it. We know that Denmark are wearing a toned-down jersey with sponsors who didn't want to show publicity here in Qatar. And just to give a little bit of context, the Hugo Lloris armband is the fact that he is the captain of France. And under the bracket that Louis Saha mentioned, one of the players with more experience and the representative, really, of the French national team, it was thought, many people thought that it was expected Hugo Lloris should wear an armband, including the French sports minister, who just recently put pressure, quite simply, on Hugo Lloris to do so. It is true, however, as Jess Fishlock said, that it is a massively delicate situation. We've heard everything that Chloe mentioned before. 300,000 Qataris only in a country where there are 3 million people, and where the laws, perhaps unlike anywhere else in the world, is even if you were born in Qatar, you do not receive Qatari citizenship, because the citizenship here goes basically through genetics and whether or not you are a Qatari by history. You get a free job, you get a free wage. There are a lot of benefits put in place here for the Qatari population. What I can say as well is that since we've been here and speaking to some of the locals, a lot of the conversation is somewhat even anger to the fact that the West has depicted them in this way. There has to be progress, but let us not forget that Qatar is a country that's barely 50 years old. So it is a country that is going to have to progress, and the real question is the legacy of what the nation does moving on in the future. Because as Chloe mentioned, once the world media goes away, what happens here in Qatar? Are they going to continue? Are there going to be other major events where the world is going to come back? Are tourists really going to come to a country like Qatar, where perhaps you can't drink, where there are still those restrictions on human rights? Because another thing that Jess Fishlock mentioned was it's okay to have those conversations. Those conversations need to be had, but it has to be done in a respectful way. And I had the chance as well to speak to the First Minister of Wales, who mentioned the same thing, that his agenda here wasn't to preach to the Qatari authorities that they have to change or shouldn't change, but it was just to have that discussion around the table about common values, about inclusivity, about being been in a modern world. Because as you mentioned before, James, hypocrisy was the word used by Gianni Infantino and FIFA, and that Europe, for example, should apologise for the next 3,000 years for their colonial past. But of course, that was a long time ago, and I think the world, generally speaking, has moved on in terms of its expectations and and what is deemed correct and not correct in terms of human rights abuse, which of course happen everywhere. And as Chloe mentioned, Qatar is very far ahead, perhaps compared to a neighbour like Saudi Arabia in terms of guaranteeing basic human rights. But the question is, are those going to be assured going forwards? And footballers are just here to play a tournament. Dave made that quite clear. The little they can do, the little discussions they can be involved in, then some will speak and some won't.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because there's the side of wanting to make the country attractive to tourists, but at the same time you've got to make the country attractive for the people from the rest of the world to want to come. But what's for sure is there's going to be plenty of talking about all of this as players step onto the pitch throughout the competition. Well, speaking of the competition, let's turn to the events at the very centre of it all. 32 teams, only one will make it. France's favourite status now in jeopardy. 3 other teams, though, are certainly in very good shape.
It's been 20 years since 5-time World Cup champions Brazil last won the coveted title. On the team are top goalkeepers, including Liverpool's Alisson and Manchester City's Ederson. From Vinicius to Neymar, coach Tite is also spoilt for choice up front.
People think that Brazil is one of the favourites to win, and I really think that we are.
Despite Giovanni Lo Celso's absence, Argentina's midfield will be a true strength. 35-year-old Lionel Messi, meanwhile, will be giving it everything for his last shot at lifting a World Cup trophy. The perfect way to top his Copa America win and wrap up a glittering career. After England finished runners-up in the Euros, the 3 Lions are hungry for a first World Cup title since 1966. Despite the criticism, Gareth Southgate has called up United's Harry Maguire.
He's one of our best centre-backs, so I think we know within the squad we've got a lot of players that we know have been to tournaments, have performed at the level, know what's required.
Southgate's lineup is a mix of seasoned players like Harry Kane and younger blood like Jude Bellingham. A balance he'll be hoping is a winning combination.
Karim, Brazil are coming into this as the top favourites. It's been 20 years since they last lifted the trophy. Neymar and company, they're going to do everything they can, but at the same time, you've got Lionel Messi, who wants to do everything he can in his last World Cup too.
Yes, obviously, but in my opinion, Brazil is the #1 favorite because I saw them in September when they played friendlies in France against Ghana and Tunisia. Well, these are not the best teams in this World Cup, but still, they were very impressive. They have an exceptional front line, obviously with Neymar, you talked about him, and we follow him with PSG. He has such a great season so far, but I will stress on the back line, about defenders, about Thiago Silva, about Marquinhos. They have experience at every level, at every line, and they have, most of all, 2 world-class goalkeepers, Alisson and Ederson. And that's why, in my opinion, Brazil has the best squad among the 32 teams in this World Cup. So I will put them in #1. And for Argentina, the thing is that Leo Messi is in a good shape. We remember last season that was very complicated for him when he arrived in Paris. He has a so-so season with, it was hard for him to adapt to the PSG, to the French league as well, but he's in a better shape now with 7 goals so far in the French league and in the Champions League. So it will be the last chance for Leo Messi to win this trophy. He was a finalist back in 2014 with Argentina, and they were kicked out of the competition by France 4 years ago. So that will be his last chance. And Argentina is in the midst of an incredible line with more than 30 games without losing. And among that, they're was the win of the Copa America last year. So that will be the last chance for Leo Messi. They have a big squad, but a lot of injuries in Argentina, and that's why I will put them like maybe in my second favorite position so far.
Just behind Brazil then.
Exactly.
But Brazil, yes, they've got an amazing squad, and it's impressive when you look at it. But when you look at it, the journey that they might have, they could come up to with the likes of Portugal, Uruguay, Spain, Germany, and that's just before reaching the semi-finals. So it's not an easy road that they've got ahead of them.
Yes, but for me, it's good for them to have a strong group. When you look at their group, the Group G, with Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon, that won't be obvious games. That won't be easy games. And it's better maybe sometimes to get into the competition with those tough games in comparison with an easy group. So that will put them into the atmosphere of this World Cup. And then you talk about their possible opponents for the round 16 and then on and on up to the final. We will see about Brazil, but still I think they have all their weapons, all their arms to go through in this competition. And when you see Brazil winning the World Cup last time, 2002, that was in Japan and South Korea. The way before that, it was in 1994 in the United States. So they always shine when it's not in Europe. So maybe that will be the case this time in Qatar.
Could be. I mean, certainly, if they haven't got the means to make it, then you know which squad does. Let's ask Simon just a little bit because England, of course, on paper as well, looking very impressive. They're in there with the favourites, but the squads, you know, despite all of this, Gareth Southgate has come under criticism for his quite conservative techniques on the pitch.
Absolutely, and their techniques that have done England no favours, particularly recently when they were relegated from the UEFA Nations League group, a group that included Hungary, Italy and Germany, but 2 defeats to Hungary, including a really humiliating 4-0 loss in Wolves at the Molineux, I believe. So it is a tough time. The problem, I believe, for England is that there are certain positions that are absolutely not knuckle-down players who are out of form, players who are coming back into form. The second centre-back position, if we assume that John Stones is going to play in one of them for either Harry Maguire, is a massive problem considering the Manchester United club captain hasn't played at all. Injuries in the right-back position means that Kieran Trippier should be playing. But in midfield, do you go for a more conservative approach with a double pivot defence with Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips, or with a Jude Bellingham that has all the keys to become some of the best players, or do you play a more adventurous style?
So, for Southgate, is this all or nothing for him? I mean, he did reach the final of the Euros, but of course 3 Lions with no title under him yet.
No, but he has installed a lot of pride and a certain credibility to English football after 10 years of absolute debacle on the international stage. We remember what happened in South Africa with the disallowed goal against Germany, but then failing to qualify for Euro 2008, going out of the World Cup in 2014 in the group stages, not making it past Iceland at Euro 2016 and the last 16. So he has certainly installed a certain credibility. It is make or break, but I think it's make or break more in terms of the style of the football that he brings with the players that he does have. Because when you have players like Phil Foden, Mason Mount, Harry Kane, Kyle Walker, Marcus Rashford, Raheem Sterling, you are expected to score goals. And with a group in which England features against Iran, Wales and USA, they will hope to finish the group top by winning all 3 games and giving themselves a little bit of momentum heading into the competition, which, like I said, they don't have after losing their last Nations League game with a very disappointed relegation in that. So it all hinges, I think, on the first games for England to see if they can get their mojo back on and see if ultimately it does come home or not.
All right, well, we have 5 African teams, meanwhile, who are heading into the tournament. The number 1 favourite, Senegal, have been delivered a massive blow, unfortunately, with Sadio Mane set to be out of the squad. This is the chance for Aliou Cisse to show that he can continue perhaps that good form after taking them to that AFCON victory game.
Yes, exactly. And we went there for the AFCON in Cameroon, where Senegal clinched their first ever cup. And I think that was a moment for them to pass from the favorite to a winning team, and that's why I see Senegal shining in this World Cup despite the Sadio Mane's injury. We talked a lot about it those last days, but still they have confidence. I saw them playing in September against Bolivia, and they have more confidence even in their way of playing because they have a huge squad as well at the African level with full of abilities, full of possibilities for Aliou Cissé, even on the bench, for example. But now they have all the confidence to go forward, to move forward. The last World Cup, they stopped at the group stage because of the yellow cards difference with Japan. Imagine. So I think they have all the means to go further, and that's the best chance, in my opinion, for African teams, because the other ones, Cameroon, Tunisia, Ghana, Morocco, they have many changes those last month, whereas coaches or some players for Ghana as well. So Senegal is the most stable team among those African representatives at the World Cup.
And among these 5 teams, of course, this is the first time that we've actually got managers, head coaches, who are from those actual countries, because we've, of course, seen a lot of European managers, etc., come in to manage football, African football teams. This is not the case. Is there a sense of pride amongst these teams?
Yes, and Aliou Cissé talked about it earlier on during his press conference. This is a pride for Africa because we're used to have European coaches, and this is a clear change of mindsets. And we see that for those teams, they are in the World Cup. So it is possible to have an African-born or African-raised coach and winning trophies or going to the best stages in the world. So this is a clear change of mindset, and we'll see if it will be profitable for African teams. But for Senegal, for example, we'll see it during the AFCON, and the stability is better than instability we saw with Morocco, for example.
And you think so Senegal can make it when they come up against teams like the Netherlands in their group stage?
Yeah, and they will play first against the Netherlands. So we'll see if they can manage to do without Sadio Mane first, because he's the megastar of the team, and Sadio Mane was at the center of Aliou Cissé's gameplay. So now, how to do without him? He has some weapons in the front line, for example, Boulaïdia, Crépin Diatta, and other players. But Sadio Mane is the key of that. So that will be a good test. But in my opinion, when you see Qatar and Ecuador, they have all the means to go through. Even if it will be at the second position of the group, they can go further. But can we see Senegal? Could we see Senegal going to the quarterfinals, for example, or maybe to be the first African team to reach the semifinals? We'll see.
Well, another team that once upon a time had an impressive run at the World Cup was Cameroon. Simon, you watched Cameroon, of course, with another impressive run over at the Africa Cup of Nations at the beginning of the year. This time round, though, they're now headed by the legendary Rigobert Song, who's stepping in for the Indomitable Lions. This is his first big test, and of course there's going to be a lot expected from him, but it's essentially he's being thrown in the deep end this way.
Yes, a lot of pressure on the shoulders of Rigoberto Song, and perhaps unfairly so, in a very difficult group for Cameroon with Brazil, Switzerland and Serbia as well. I think it's an achievement in itself, really, that Cameroon made it to the World Cup by beating Algeria with a very, very last-minute goal to qualify. It is going to be a tough competition for the Indomitable Lions, because if you look at their squad, you're just thinking, where are the goals going to come from? Have they really got the strength and depth to try and worry the other teams? Yes, Vincent Aboubakar had a good Africa Cup of Nations, but faded a little bit in the games where he should have shined. And if you look at their two best players, they're two players who are playing in the Serie A, with Andrea Onana in goal for Inter Milan and Zambo Anguissa for Napoli, who has been absolutely brilliant in midfield. But when you're thinking of where are the goals going to come, 3 draws aren't going to be enough. So it is going to be a tough one, I think, for Cameroon.
One of the squads that we haven't talked about yet, though, is Ghana. Karim, they haven't been in the best of form recently. They're going to come up against Uruguay. That's going to be something, a little flash to the past, isn't it?
Yeah, flashback of the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, where Ghana was out of the competition in the quarterfinals after a penalty missed by Jana Zamoa, if I remember well. But yeah, Ghana is in the midst of generations we experienced with the I brothers. They are still there, but a little bit old now, but they will lead the team. And you have talented players such as Thomas Partey, for example, who plays in Arsenal, and also Iñaki Williams, one of the new recruitments, I should say, in the Ghana squad. But I have no idea about Ghana, because this is a huge question mark. New players, but yeah, they passed through thanks to a win against Nigeria. But really, I don't know if they can go further than the first round of group.
Best of luck to them in any case. Well, the next game, the first game to start, Qatar, they're about to kick off against Ecuador in their first ever World Cup for Qatar. Simon, just very briefly, what are the hopes for Qatar?
Well, Qatar have no pressure on their shoulders, even though the locals are going to put pressure on them. They're led by the Felix Sanchez, who's from the legendary Barcelona La Masia Academy, and it's all about continuity for this Qatari side. They won the Asia Championship in 2019. They're 50th in the FIFA rankings, the third lowest team in the tournament. But they are going to be trying to do their best here, particularly to please the fans, and perhaps with an opening victory. No team who is a host nation has lost their opening match in the previous 21 editions of a World Cup.
All right, Simon, we'll enjoy that first game. We're going to go and watch this on our televisions here. We'll leave you with a few images from the opening ceremony, and we'll be here every day, of course, throughout the World Cup to go through all the action. Karim will be with us, as well as our reporters Simon and Selina on the grounds. They'll be keeping a very close eye also on, of course, all the off-pitch events. Every evening, join us here at 11:15 Paris time. Bye-bye for now.
France 20